Welcome to the Housing Roundtable of January 14th, 2025. So we have some number of people on the Zoom, and we have some number of people here in the hearing room, probably 10 or so. And I think the first thing is we'll see from a call to meeting order from each group and see if we have a quorum from the different committees and boards. So the Concord Housing Authority, is Stefan there? So too far away from me, I can't see.
Ed Larner.
Hi, Liz. I only see Ed Larner.
Yeah, hi. Oh, just Ed. I'm sorry. Thank you. Great. Thank you.
And to keep me under control. So.
Could you repeat that, please?
And then the CHDC?
Present for the CHDC is myself, Julie McClure, and Lee Smith. I don't believe...
Anyone on the Zoom from the CHDC? No? Okay.
Thank you.
And then the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust?
Keith Bergman, Chair, present. Also, Mary Hartman is here, Mike Lawson, and Rich Feely. Thanks.
Is that a quorum, Keith?
Oh, and Carrie LaFleur.
Oh, Carrie, okay.
Back of the room.
I'm sure that that is a quorum then. Very good. And the Concord Housing Foundation?
Rich Feely.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Rich. I think you're on mute. Someone removed me from the meeting.
Sorry, Nancy McJennet is here. I believe she's the only other board member I saw, but since we're not a public entity, this isn't a formal meeting anyhow. So we're here, we're listening, we'll have a little bit to say later.
Matt is here too.
Oh, Matt, missed him. Great. Okay, we're up to 3.
I don't want to read too much into it, but the host removed me from the meeting and I'm unable to rejoin because I was previously removed by the host. So could the host add me back in or something? I don't really know.
That happened to me. That happened to me the other day because I came in a little bit too early, and I was kicked off, and they couldn't get me back in. I hope they get you back in. This is Diane. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know, it's okay with me.
So the CPC is here.
The CPC is here. I'll just put this away then. Yeah. Okay. Very good. And then the select board?
Actually, the select board is here. Terry Ackerman is here. Wendy Ravelli's here, and I believe Mark Howell is online.
Yes, I'm here.
There you are. Good.
Very good. Thank you. The planning board?
Well, I see Linda Miller and Sue Felshen here, but we don't look like a quorum.
I'm here.
Yep.
Linda Miller.
Linda Miller. And so who was, it was Andrew, Sue, Linda, and who else? I'm sorry? Those three. Perfect. And then the CPC. Thank you. Yep.
Eve Eisenberg here for the CPC,
Hi,
and
nice
I
to see
see
you,
Paul and Ed and Sue and Diane are here too, so we're a quorum.
Okay, so it's Eve, Diane, and Paul, Ed.
Or
Perfect. Great. Nice to see everybody. So I think, Do you need to open your meetings? I'm sorry, I just did all that, but do you need to do that, or does that count as the open?
That counts, yeah.
Perfect, perfect.
Close enough for government work.
Yeah, very good. And so I think we're going to start with the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust presentation. Keith?
Great.
You're muted, Keith.
My fans. Okay, share. Share. All right, very good. Thanks very much. Keith Bergman, Chair of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. Wanted to thank our Roundtable partners for their leadership, and thanks to Liz Russ of the Regional Housing Services Office for convening us once again in a quarterly meeting. And as the Trust begins its 4th year in the coming months, we're grateful to the Concord community for their support. The Housing Production Plan, adopted by the Select Board and Planning Board and approved by the state 2 years ago this month, remains the town's guiding policy document on affordable housing. This roundtable is collectively charged with coordinating implementation of that plan. Our focus is not just on how funds are spent, but also on what regulatory measures can be enacted for the market to produce affordable units. In 2024, we supported MBTA community zoning and fossil fuel-free affordable housing, and both of those town bylaws are currently in effect. With the closure of MCI Concord in 2024 and the launch of reuse and redevelopment planning efforts by the town and by the state's DCAM, the housing groups have asked the RHSO to draft an informational update to the plan to advise DCAM on changes in local circumstances shown here. These include the 2020 census data that was released after the plans release in 2023, adoption of MBTA community zoning, which, by the way, for those interested, the state just this afternoon released the emergency regulations for MBTA community zoning to put the guidelines back in place on a temporary basis as a 6-month process of regulation adoption proceeds. We also supported the, and those bylaws are currently in effect and hopefully will stay in effect. As shown here, in 2023, Concord fell below its 10% goal to 9.97% when the 2020 census figures kicked in. The Novo 40B brought us to 12.81% last year, and we could reach 16.12% this year if the thorough 40B is approved. But only 40% of the total countable units will be affordable. So there's more work to do in a community where many who work here still cannot afford to live here. Even at 16.12%, only 7.2% of the total year-round housing stock would be restricted at some affordable level. That's only 517 units out of a total of 7,100. And as a baseline for the Select Board's goal for more housing diversity, we can point to the fact that Concord already has 46 units that are restricted at incomes between 100% and 150% of area median income. And while units above 80% of AMI don't count on the subsidized housing inventory, they do expand housing opportunities for the missing middle. For reference, here are 2024 household income guidelines for Concord, and in fact, for the region as a whole. For a four-person household, for example, the annual income limit is $81,600 at very low income, which is 50% of AMI, $130,000 at low income, 80%, and up to $223,000 for workforce housing, 150%. The trust can act quickly when opportunities arise if funding is available. So to help implement the housing production plan, the trust has adopted funding guidelines for maintaining and periodically updating with our Roundtable partners a list of priority projects, inviting sponsors to apply for trust funds as projects become ready to proceed. We have received a total of $5.1 million since town meeting began setting aside funds for the trust in 2019. With which we've approved $3.1 million in grants and have a current uncommitted fund balance of $2 million. These columns track our use of $500,000 in town ARPA funds, $3.1 million in general revenues, and $1.5 million in community preservation funds. Here's a summary of the projects the trust has funded thus far, and for each you see the amount of trust funding, the number of affordable units that were created or supported for each, and the resulting per unit subsidy with trust funds. The last column shows units already on the SHI by denoting their state project ID number. The Novo 40B was awarded $392,000 for the sewer improvement fee for its 51 affordable units. So that's $7,682 per unit. The rest of the cost of that $106 million project will be borne by the developer. For Assabet River Bluff, the Concord Housing Development Corporation has been awarded a total of $1.65 million from the trust for 5 affordable units there. That's a per unit cost of $330,000 with trust funds. Of the total $1.65 million, $650,000 went towards purchase of the 1 acre with an existing 2-family, and that structure will be managed as by the Housing Authority as 2 affordable rental units, and $1 million to fund construction of 3 new ownership units to be built by Habitat for Humanity of Greater Lowell. The trust thanks the town for the $500,000 in ARPA funds just awarded us in December to benefit households with incomes of up to 120% of AMI. The priority for use of those funds is the 1.4 acre surplus state property at 91B Main Street. ARPA funds must be expended by December 31, 2026. The trust also thanks the Community Preservation Committee for its vote last month, recommending that the June 2025 annual town meeting approve $740,000 for the trust to benefit households of up to 100% of AMI. That amount would bring the trust's uncommitted fund balance to $2.7 million for us to continue to move priority projects along. For future funding for affordable housing, the town continues to pursue state approval for a real estate transfer fee and a building permit surcharge to fund the trust, rather than relying exclusively on local funding. Our state legislative delegation has already refiled both of those home rule petitions. They have docket numbers assigned now. And Concord continues to participate in the LOHA Coalition's efforts for a statewide local option bill, for which our Concord rep, Carmen Gentile, has agreed to be a lead co-sponsor for this session. Community Preservation Act funds are the trust's single largest source of funding, coming from the fixed 1.5 surcharge, which pays for housing, open space, historic preservation, and recreation. The town may wish to pursue state funding or legislative earmarks, particularly to help ensure that some of the housing that gets built at MCI Concord is affordable. With our housing partners, the Trust will periodically update the list of priority projects in order to be able to put our funds to work. Here are projects advanced last year and others that are on our radar screen. We'll also be looking for new opportunities which may arise, including reuse of any surplus town properties identified for housing by the town's matrix. To help guide our priority setting for use of affordable housing funds, we're pleased to announce that MHP, the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, has just awarded the Trust technical assistance for a facilitated process to be led by an MHP staffer to help us reach a fresh consensus on spending priorities. This would involve the Trust, its Roundtable partners, all town entities dealing in development, and the public at large. We're hoping to educate the Concord community on housing development economics, cost of different kinds of units within and without free land, the amounts that qualifying households can spend to purchase or rent units, and to produce a methodology to show what the Trust would pay per unit for different subsidy strategies. We'd also want to analyze with our housing partners how best to organize to implement our joint efforts, identifying what skill sets we need to add to our mix. We're looking to begin that process with MHP very shortly. So thanks again for your advocacy and leadership, and be glad to answer any questions you have about this.
Keith, I have a question about the TAP program. So first of all, thank you for applying for that, and it's good news that we won it. What's the process that is going to, can you educate us on what is the process?
The process of going forward with the technical assistance? Yes, the very next step is, I've already heard from MHP staff that they're looking to have an initial meeting with the Trust to develop the scope of services.
Okay.
So that's being, they're approaching us to schedule a meeting to discuss that even now. Okay. So that would be the very next step. It would be my hope that we would be able to launch an event in that we're inviting people to within a month. After that, and to begin, a community process, because right now we're in, as Mary knows, we're in need of sort of a fresh look at, given all that we've done with housing and the limited dollars we have, what should our priorities be in setting goals for our limited housing funds.
Thank you.
Terry?
Hi, Keith. Terry Ackerman, Select Board, just speaking for myself. I don't know how hard or easy it is to go back to that slide. You were showing a slide of all the projects, the list of projects, and the cost per unit. Yeah, the next one after this, I think.
Yeah, let me find that one. It's not responding.
I can ask the question without it if you, so did those costs and revenues, I think was that revenue only from the housing trust, and not including CPC or any other free cash or any other town revenues? Yes indeed. Okay, yeah. Because when I looked at that, the cost per unit of the buy downs was what I was particularly interested in, and it was a lot lower than I'm remembering from 3 to 5 years ago. Yeah, I think that's it. I'm really pleased that the cost per unit is looking, in most cases, really reasonable. And I do remember several years ago when there were some costs per unit that were $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, which I thought was not reasonable. And so my question is, in this dollar per unit, is that really a total cost, or are there other dollars coming in from CPC or free cash or something else?
Yeah, and I can certainly revise that, this chart to show like a complete
Okay.
local subsidy. In some cases, projects have even had outside funding, state funds or whatever.
Well, I'm interested in the total town funding. Like, for example, in the Novo project, we know the developer put in a lot more money, but from our point of view, this 7,000.
That's it.
That's a bargain for us. So,
For Novo, the town's contribution, as far as I'm aware, is simply the $392,000 the trust did.
So I guess I'd be interested in seeing the total cost per unit that the town is putting in.
Yeah. I'll be happy to add that, and I can say the one, I can point to 3 projects in particular that Assabet River Bluff, I would say that, and anyone who has better information can correct me, but I believe that $2.5 million is the total local subsidy for 5 units, so that's $500,000 per unit.
Right, so the point I'm getting to is, as we go forward with this new facilitation, with this new strategies and priorities, I'll be one of the people advocating for the biggest bang for the buck and try to get the most units per tax dollar, so. But anyway, this is very useful information. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and I'll be happy to. I ended up putting that additional information in footnotes to myself because I couldn't fit them all on the screen. So thanks. Ed and then Diane.
Yeah, on the Forest Ridge Road, this is shown there at 400,000. The CHA LLC also participated with, I believe it was 140,000 for the total unit cost of 540,000, which Terry was, thinking that we were getting some inexpensive property, but that was more like closer to the market rate for the unit.
Thanks, Ed. Diane?
No. Oops. Thank you, Keith. I need some clarification about I'm glad it was a grant, but for advice about how to proceed. It seems to me that, one of the things that I've noticed is that we often hire outside forces to come in and help us with things when we have our own local expertise, which is really pretty impressive. Why are we turning to an outside group to help advise us or design what we do? Sure. And could you help us understand why this is important? I'm sure it is, but I just don't understand. No, Thank you very much.
I'm happy to. It's our version of calling Stuart Saganor and asking for his help locally. And that's a reference for community preservation folks who know that there is something called the Community Preservation Coalition.
There sure is. Thank you.
Which provides endless resources and guidance for local CPCs. Housing trusts have nothing like that. The closest that we have is the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, which is the quasi-public entity that comes in and trains new trusts when they get established, works with towns to help them decide whether to do a trust. They have not as robust a training program that it's been, which is some of it's virtual, and they have an annual training session, a MHP Housing Institute. So, but they are the chief supporter for trusts. So what they have awarded us is they even call it Affordable Housing Trust Intensive Technical Assistance. And I was drawn by the word intensive because what we've been finding here, we've had some very long discussions about how to spend, with our housing partners and with ourselves about how to spend the housing dollars. And it was my suggestion that, well, why don't we bring in someone from MHP to walk us through it, and then we'll all be in agreement on how we get out of there. But it's as though we've invited our Stuart Saganorian to come and help us.
Thank you. That's for those of us on the CPC, that's remarkably clarifying. Thank you, Keith.
Paul?
Hey, Keith. Yeah, I couldn't find my electronic hand. Could you comment sort of an overall strategic point of view on the emphasis on ownership versus rental going forward in terms of affordability? I mean, there's a lot of rental units coming online, but where does affordable ownership come in sort of the future investments and allocation of funds?
It's a great question, and I think it's one that will be at the top of our concerns in trying to figure out how to use our limited funds. And particularly because it's the ownership units would require far greater public subsidy than the rentals would. And I mean, just some figures I saw today of what developing ownership units at the 91B Main Street surplus property might be. It's in the same ballpark of what we've been doing with Asset at River Bluff, $500,000 per unit. So, but if you're going to do ownership units, you need the money. You need to come up with the money yourself, which under our and I guess is the strongest reason that I can think of why Concord should have a real estate transfer fee to fund our affordable housing efforts here, because to achieve ownership, which is gosh, the ideal for being part of a community, it would cost more and would require more resources. But there's an important discussion to be had about at what point is a per unit cost too much to do a project. You crunch the numbers, and if the numbers are too much, you don't do the project. And that's sort of what we're trying to introduce to our deliberative process here.
Yeah, just to add to that, you know, I was thinking of, and I'll show my ignorance here, I was thinking of developments like Mill Run and PRDs that could take advantage of our new zoning to kind of have smaller houses, maybe in smaller footprints. Maybe those are less expensive to develop.
I don't know if any of the real estate pros in the room want to chime in here or others, but this is definitely something that we want to have an informed discussion about through this facilitated process.
Sure. Thank you.
Mark, and then Rich.
Sure. I'd like to dig in a little bit more on how we should think about the technical assistance program. Is that going to lead to a revision of the housing production plan, or is it more of a attempt to figure out how to achieve the goals of the existing housing production plan, or is that yet to be determined?
Yeah, it's the latter, that we're not engaging we won't have a MHP professional here to rewrite the housing production plan, but one of the slides that I showed earlier was that we have a set of written guidelines that the trust has developed in concert with all of our housing partners, and And I would expect that we would see an updated set of funding guidelines come out of that process.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Rich?
Yeah, before everybody gets sticker shock, I just want to remind them that, if you build a workforce house, there is substantial ability to carry the cost of that house in the ultimate owner. What we're subsidizing is the difference between what the market charges to build and what, say, somebody with an income of 100 or 120,000 or something like that can pay. And one of the things I want to get out of this consultation is a table that shows us, yes, if you build a 2-bedroom unit for somebody at $120,000 a year, what's the net subsidy from the town after you take credit for what that individual is capable of paying? And that's a complicated calculation that nobody's done here yet, but that's one of the things I'm looking for. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you, Keith. As always, very informative, great conversation and questions. I think Julie's going to present for the Concord Housing Development Corporation. The CHDC had a board reorganization, and Julie is its new president and chair. And so welcome, Julie.
Thank you for having me, and we need to make a note that another member of our board joined the meeting. I believe Ray is on the Zoom, is that right? Welcome, thank you for tuning in. Ray, let the minutes reflect that Ray Andrews also joined, which means we do have a quorum present. So it's difficult to follow a wonderful presentation that you just received from Keith, but it also helps to inform a bit what I'm going to share with you. If you have been paying attention to housing in Concord, you probably have heard a lot about this Assabet River Bluff project. And a good part of what we're doing today and things that we've approved are to move that project forward. And I think, you heard a bit about the subsidy that went into it, the local funding for it, but there's also more to know about this that I think makes it a very special project. First of all, it was land that was owned by a local landlord that decided it would be good to sell a project, a parcel to the town. So that was a sort of friendly sale, step one. Why do I tell you this? Because if you know friends like that who want to sell friendly parcels to the town, we would very much be interested in connecting with you. So please keep that in mind. And then there was a great deal of collaboration that went into the project in terms of considerations around conservation, recreation. It abuts the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. And also with regards to development, that it not be, out of pace with what is present in the neighborhood. So there was a lot of thought that went into this project. It's going to be 1 acre that is built at a site where 5 additional acres remain untouched.
6.
So it's 6 acres.
6 acres untouched. Total 7
yeah,
acres.
And so lots of thought has gone into that. And with regards to the project developer, we are partnering with Habitat for Humanity, and that's another feel-good part of this story that I think is very important to touch upon, because we've had some other successful projects with Habitat for Humanity. Some of the folks in this room may have volunteered previously with Habitat for Humanity and will be doing outreach to the community to encourage involvement. We know Habitat for Humanity also plans to work with some high school students from the local technical school. So this is more than the housing that we're building. It's also, involvement with the local Concord spirit every step of the way. Things that we're doing with that right now are weekly meetings with various legal representatives to ensure the conveyance of the deed happens in a timely manner, that we can then file SHI units, which is very important versus, with regard to what Keith has just presented. We need to have enough units to be within compliance with the state so that we as a community get to set our own pace of development. And that's a particular goal that we have. we are really excited about that project. So stay tuned, and if you want to lift a hammer, come and join us. We'll let you know about opportunities to do that. Regarding the buy-down program, this is something that we've received a number of questions about, and it's certainly, I think, part of a successful story for CHGC. There have been some projects that have involved buying modest dwellings and retrofitting them to meet today's compliance for public health standards, et cetera, and then selling those units to people with modest or low income situations. And some of those houses are up and down Main Street throughout Concord, so you might be driving past your neighbors and thinking, oh, there's all different kinds of people that live in Concord, and that kind of project makes that possible. Some people who might qualify for buy-down units are people who work in the type of essential services that you really need for a community to be fully functioning. People like EMTs, nurses, teachers, firefighters, police officers. Because the cost of living here is so expensive, we want to have housing like that so that people don't have to commute from Maine or New Hampshire to do that service work for us. So we're very interested in exploring how to do that, of course, in a sustainable way and in partnership with the town. And we're excited about, this MHP, I think, program to explore how to do that efficiently. One thing I want to note is that some other communities that have a larger volume of buy-down units, they maintain those buy-down units and sell them over time. And they sometimes have just a constant flow of workforce housing with buying and selling that permits those households to take that equity and move somewhere else. Or maybe when they're finished working, retire, take that nest egg of equity and move to a place where they can, afford a comfortable retirement after having done essential service work. So it's, I think it's a very important part of the American dream that we can lift up. Regarding 91B Main Street, you might have heard a little bit about that from Keith's presentation. There is a parcel that is owned by the state. We are working with the town and the state to identify how that parcel might be developed, but it's in a preliminary exploration at this point, and there may be some ARPA funds that go into that project, which was identified in Keith's proposal. And with regard to Junction Village, some folks who've been following housing for a while, maybe you've heard that phrase before and you're thinking, has it been a while since we've talked about that? Yes, it may have been a while since we've talked about that. We try to stay on top of that by revisiting it every couple of months, but the short story is there's a parcel near, and which used to be a part of the MCI Concord site. Right now, because there is a long-range plan to redevelop that site, we are looking toward what that master plan and vision might be. And when we have greater clarity, we will work with the town and the state to ensure that it's developed to meet the goals of the bigger picture. So that is what we have for the time being, and I welcome questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
I have a question. So, Julie, thank you for that. I'm the liaison to the Ag Committee, and as you know, farmers in town are something that we value, and they don't make a lot of money, and they work really hard. So they're asking me at their meetings, what can they do around maybe getting more affordable housing? So what would be your advice for me to bring to them so that they can start a conversation, I guess, to find out what's available for them? Because I think it's really nice when you have affordable housing that hits more than one goal. I mean, it's not just affordable housing, but it's also, it's helping you achieve another goal that the town has. So what are you thinking?
So my understanding is there's a history of town-provided affordable housing opportunities for farmers, and I think that looking to that history and also what additional funding might be available to preserve farmland is an absolutely fantastic thing to do. Yes, the farming history of Concord is a part of who we are, part of our story, part of our now. So I think
could I ask them to get in touch with you to find out what exactly you would need from them? I mean, help me tell them what's their next step. as far as maybe getting on your radar as far as an affordable unit for farmers?
An affordable unit for farmers.
Right.
So we may have existing units available that would be through the RHSO. And I believe that farmers would likely qualify for units that are available through the RHSO. And why that's relevant is because it's not only for our community, but also for the broader neighboring communities. So they could be, maybe they look at something in Concord, but they could also maybe look at something 2 towns over and be able to commute, right? It's a larger network of affordable subsidized housing.
Okay, I'll put them in touch with you. How's that?
It might be better to send them toward the RHSO. My colleague Liz right here is the good person to speak with.
I think they're looking for affordable housing in Concord because their farms are in Concord. So they're wondering if Concord would, again, so my thinking is, wouldn't it be great if sometimes when we have affordable housing, we're hitting, more than one goal? And if the goal is to keep farmers in Concord, then if we could marry or have affordable housing specifically for farmers, and I don't even know if we can. I don't even know.
So the farms, I'm familiar with them in Concord.
Yep.
A number of which are already in an affordable housing arrangement, have farmers living on site.
Okay.
But perhaps you're describing additional farm workers. That's what I'm imagining. Is that accurate?
No, actually, I think I'm describing additional farmers, like new farmers that are moving into town and taking over existing farms. So I think we need to learn more.
Okay.
Okay, so we don't have to do it now.
Great.
I just wanted to get this on your radar.
Sure.
That this is something that's important, that I hear more and more from them, and I don't know where to send them or how to. So I would like to get a message to them is, okay, here's the next step you should take to maybe make that happen for you. That's why I brought it up.
Sure. Thank you for bringing that.
I'll just mention, on the Assabet River Bluff, Julie mentioned all the progress that's being made. So in fact, I think over the next month, you'll see actual activity on the site, and that's always a sign of progress. There's always a lot of paperwork progress, and we've been working very hard on that, and you don't see that even though it's happening, but you'll actually see activity on the site begin.
Seeing no other questions. Oh, we have a hand up over there. Okay, great. Pamela.
In the middle there.
Hi, Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green. I'm wondering if there's any interest in some of the new green modular buildings like that have recently been developed by companies for small and modular solar and all of that ready that can be brought in by a truck that are very inexpensive relative to normally built buildings, like $50,000 for a one-bedroom apartment. I'm thinking of the company called Stackables, I think? Boxables, I'm sorry, Boxable. Is there any ability for us to be the developer as a town rather than have to sub it out to another developer? I think it's good that we're using Habitat for Humanity because that leverages it, but can we look, for instance, for us for new things, like might we be able to develop our own?
Thank you for bringing that question. So I think there is a lot of interest in prefabricated construction, and I think that it's it's good to imagine how we might incorporate that into what we're doing, because we as a town are very concerned with sustainable development. It's one of the things that comes up frequently when we look at site development and the specifics of construction. So I certainly take that question to heart. I will say that with regard to the project we're discussing now, there was a open proposal that was published, and we received some applicants. We reviewed them, and Habitat for Humanity in this case was the one that sort of rose to the top in that process. And so I could imagine in a different project, perhaps we might receive a proposal that involves prefabricated construction, and that would be considered very carefully. It wasn't a part of this particular one, but I do think that it's a possible exploration for future projects. So thanks for bringing those remarks.
Like Junction Village or the senior affordable housing building.
Or many applications, perhaps.
Andrew, did you have a question as well? No? Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for listening and for your questions. I think I might ask for the next.
Yeah, I think it's Megan. Yep. Thank you, Julie. A lot going on.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Megan Zamudo. I'm the Deputy Town Manager, and I'm happy to be here with you today. I can go on to the next slide, please. If you were at the joint meeting of the Select Board, School Committee, and Finance Committee in December, and/or the League of Women Voters last Friday, you may be seeing a similar presentation, and if I say any jokes, they'll be the same ones, so I apologize in advance, but we're trying to get the word out about some of the work that we're doing here, and I know you asked me last month to come in and provide an update on MCI Concord, 2229 Main Street, and the Peabody School. But like I've said in those other presentations, before I do that, I'd like to zoom out a little bit to let you all know about an effort that we're working on right now. Next slide, please. So, we're focused on the select board goals in this FY25. I listed a number of goals here that are related to land use, and some mention these specific properties by name. So, of course, we have the MCI Concord goal to engage the community, legislative delegation, and state agencies in robust planning process that ensures that Concord's interests are expressed and prioritized during the disposition of the MCI property. We have a advisory board that's been appointed by the select board that's hard at work on this effort, and some members are here today. We have a goal to utilize the expertise of the 2229 Main Street Advisory Task Force and input from the community to determine next steps on that 46-acre parcel, and there are also members of that task force here today. Work with the senior management team to develop a land use matrix and action plan that best makes matches between municipal needs and potential land available. That's really what I'm here to talk about. And the last three goals are to evaluate town-owned properties for possible reuse or disposition, increase revenue generation, and of course, protect and enhance the diversity of housing stock via continued focus on affordable housing. So that's really a key part of this discussion today. All right, next slide, please. So this I used as an example. We have a number of plans, guiding documents, and resources to help us here. This particular study came out in 2020, and it is a municipal facilities assessment and master plan. This document came out in 2020, and it analyzes a significant amount of data, and it kind of indicates some failure points in some of our facilities. There was a tour this past summer for our Public Works campus on Walden Street and our public safety campus on Walden Street and Public Works campus on Keyes Road, and looking at some of the programs and the size and scope and condition of the buildings and noticing a disconnect there. So that was highlighted in this study, and those are really on our mind when we're thinking about the land that's available and how we could consider reusing it. So next slide, please. This is a familiar graphic for those that have come to my other presentations here, but through the lens of the select board goals and the plans and the studies that we have that span, from housing to climate action to a number, open space, recreation, we are looking at these 5 kind of buckets of how to make some matches. So we of course need some space for public works, space for public safety. I didn't mention that master plan did mention some efficiencies that could be found through consolidated town offices, so that's something that's being explored. We operate out of a number of town facilities all across town, which is, in some ways, is very nice to be a presence across town, but since this study identified efficiencies that could be found, we're putting it in our list here. Commercial development, focusing on, opportunities to look at increasing our commercial footprint in town, and then of course housing development, which is why you are all here today, looking at diversity of units, looking at additional protecting, preserving, and creating more affordable and diversity of housing units. So now, next slide, I'll get into some high-level updates of why you asked me to be here. First is MCI Concord. As I mentioned, we have some folks here that are involved in that advisory board, if there are more specific questions for them. But I can tell you that this site is currently under the care and control of the Department of Corrections. So we in the town are working closely with the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance, which is DCAM, and they're in charge of facilitating the disposition of the property. So the folks that are really spending a lot of time on this is the advisory board. They have broken out into 3 subcommittees to efficiently do their work. They have a community outreach subcommittee, a legal and government affairs subcommittee, and a land use and planning strategy subcommittee. And so the advisory board meets pretty regularly, just about every other Monday, and it's hybrid. They meet in the room over here and online, so if people are interested in hearing what's going on, that's a great opportunity. We also have a pretty robust web page with FAQs and some maps, so that is updated with presentations and meeting information. So if people want to hear what's going on, you can always tune in or take a look at that. There was a legislative earmark, which we were grateful to receive in the FY25 budget for $725,000, and the work that's being done right now is we have a request for proposals for a consultant to work on planning, market study, and feasibility, and that request for proposals is out in the world, and people are downloading it and reading it and asking us questions, and so the advisory board is going to be working on reviewing proposals in the next couple weeks, and we're hoping to have a consultant on board in mid-February. So for 2229 Main Street, there's been a series of committees that have worked on this, and I just want to recognize that. There's the NMI StarMet, I think that's what it's called, committee who did a significant amount of work and really informed the work of the 2229 Main Street Advisory Task Force, which has recently completed their report on this topic, and they presented their report to the select board last month, and it's live on our website if you want to take a look at it. And the select board is planning to discuss the next steps on this parcel at a future meeting, I think over the next couple months. And I didn't mention the 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee, which is still reviewing the cleanup work and making sure that the cleanup is being done appropriately and providing a great service to the community there. So the task force, and the chair I think is on the call here, but they are recommending that the select board, this is a spoiler for the report, if you want to get to the last page here, that they move forward on a path toward potential acquisition of this property in order to both take advantage of the opportunities for meeting the multiple needs of the town, as well as more fully control the use of the property. The task force had a number of recommendations, so this is really a conditional recommendation to acquire the site at a later date under certain conditions. and that could be clarified through negotiation. So that one is still kind of happening, and I encourage folks to pay attention to the select board agenda to see when items of interest will be on, and review that thorough document. And finally, the Peabody School. So this is 3 acres that we have the school parcel, which is just about 8 acres, the Cushing Field parcel, which is just under 10 acres, and then there is this other parcel down the road a little bit, which I believe is the Leaching Field, which is 2 acres. So it's a total of 20 acres here. We are building a new middle school, so this is expected to be vacated in February. And this was discussed at the League of Women Voters last Friday, and as Mary shared at that presentation, that if there was going to be a transfer of ownership, that it would require notification by the school committee to the select board, and then a 2/3 vote by the townspeople at town meeting. So that's my understanding of the process there. There's been a lot of interest in this one. There's been a lot of questions, and I think we're listening to what folks are interested in here, and also thinking about all the municipal needs and other needs in this community, and thinking about how all these puzzle pieces kind of fit together, which is complicated but exciting at the same time. Next slide, please. So these are not buildings that you asked about here, and rightfully so, because they're all currently being used, but I wanted to mention some of these properties. Our Kais Road, we have Public Works, we also have our Department of Planning and Land Management that's at that campus. The Ripley School holds the school administration, Public Safety at Walden Street I mentioned a little bit. So these, we've talked about some of the challenges, and the school superintendent recently shared that the Ripley building is nearing the end of its useful life as well. So I bring these up because in this effort, we're thinking about if any of these campuses aren't needed for municipal use anymore, there's consideration for how they could meet other community goals. So is that other municipal uses? Is it housing? Is it commercial? There's a number of factors here, but this effort is, a lot of things are on the table as we start to analyze. Okay, nearing the end here. So of course, as we're starting to look at this, different programs require various different criteria. So we're going to really need to come up with criteria for each program. We have a lot of the information. We have the subject matter experts for the municipal uses, and we have great documents like the Housing Production Plan and Envision Concord 2030, which clearly outlines that we care about housing that's walkable and close to transportation and close to things that folks can connect to. So we have a lot of data. And now it's kind of taking it from a wish list to weighing things and figuring out what is going to work best where. When we're looking at public safety, of course, we have to really prioritize response time. So there's a number. We need to look at environmental factors. There's floodplain. There's just a lot to consider in all of these. But this is really an unprecedented time with so many parcels kind of bubbling up for potential use in the future with such other critical needs, and so there's a lot to think about. And the last slide is just noting that the select board is considering appointing a working group to work on this and to think this through, to have public meetings, to talk about this as a community. This is a community. These are community decision points, and what we're hoping to do is to frame this kind of large problem, or opportunity, which could have so many different outcomes, in a way that we can elevate the values of this community, think about what logically makes sense, look at the timelines for these properties and our values, and find a way to move forward with a recommendation. So that's what I have today. Thank you very much. Diane, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you so much for your presentation, which I've had the pleasure of hearing last Friday.
A couple times.
I have what I think is not really a simple question, but it's a very direct question. How are these decisions being made? I mean, we've seen the complexity of the matrices at which you're looking with such care. We've seen the complexities of housing deliberations, land deliberations, various town needs. As Bush said, he said, I get to be the decider. Who is or are the deciders in this process? And how is it that we can address them or convey to them the sensibilities or the feelings that we have? Thank you.
Sure. I think that's a great question. There's going to be a working group, I think, appointed by the select board to work on this. Ultimately, town meeting approves funding for projects. So I really see this as trying to identify our needs, make some recommendations, hear a feedback loop, and ultimately have a proposal down the line for a plan that makes sense based on data. And if the community is supportive of some of these efforts that are really, down the line a little bit in terms of where and how much, then I would see this as a town meeting approval. I don't know, Mary, if you have a...
I think that's a great answer. I think the working group will make recommendations, but the ultimate decision maker is town meeting, and that might include zoning changes as well. So it's through zoning and funding that I think the town will really decide.
Well, I have a follow-up question, if I may. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yes, okay. So Megan, again, you've just done such a fine job, and you've developed the matrices and exposed the places where there are openings. To say that town meeting has the ultimate deliberation, that only follows a warrant presentation, which deliberates how that land is going to be used or where it will be used. I just wonder, when you talk about a working group, is this a committee that will deliberate on all of this? I'm just a little bit, this is really born of naivete and confusion, so could somebody enlighten me?
Yeah, I think the charge hasn't been drafted yet, Diane, and it's being developed right now, and so I'll defer to you, Mary.
No, that's great. I think that my vision would be that the working group would make recommendations and the select board would advance articles at town meeting within a...
And Mary, who do you imagine making up this working group?
The select board.
Oh, just the select board. So not the, okay. So the league sent speaking for the League Town Government Committee and the Housing Committee, we sent a letter saying we think that there really needs to be, for instance, a committee that looks at Peabody School. But there are other kind of, as we discussed in our meeting at the first Friday, this is and as Paul Bohm elucidated, it's a matrix. It's like a four-layer chessboard game with so many things being considered. Is there a specific group that will be looking at all these various considerations, and how is that being, who's appointing that, and how is that being determined, so that the citizens of Concord can address and talk about all of this with you?
So I'm going to jump in here.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, go.
You're rightfully pointing out that there are some decisions that are sort of independent from each other, but affect each other when we're thinking about these things. So, for example, there's a specific process that we're engaged in the MCI Advisory Board, working with the state to try to outline what that property is going to be. And that leads to a very specific outcome, which is the state ultimately disposing of that property, hopefully in a way that's congruent with a set of goals that we have. And so there are going to be certain sorts of decisions that will need to be made. Some of them are zoning at town meeting, but some of them are more goal-oriented than that. In other words, the community expressing a preference for items that might appear in an RFP when the state goes to dispose of the property and seek a developer for the property. And that's separate from, any decision that has to do with 2229 Main Street or the Peabody process. But I think what we're thinking about when we say that we're looking at impaneling a group here is that we want to kind of lay out a timeline during which these various decisions need to be made, and some of them are small, but might section off certain options or enable certain options. And I think what Mary intended to say was the select board has actually been, at our last meeting, decided that we would each go out and recruit and propose some citizen individuals who would help with sort of sorting out these several different initiatives that have to do with these particular properties and this land use matrix and MCI, and act as a way of kind of engaging in that. And this is a process that is going to end up taking a few, probably at least a couple of years. So, but there are some decision points along the way that will need to be made before. The school committee will have to declare Peabody surplus or not, and then somebody's going to have to engage in caretaking of that property. And so there's some, there are different levels of activities that need to take place, and we recognize that we need to sort of get a roadmap to those so that we don't miss any opportunities, and so that we have the opportunity to try to focus in on what decisions could be made or should be made along the way as we develop this once in a generation, arguably once in a century sort of opportunity to really think about what adds up to 150 to 160 acres of land, depending on how you count it, that can be deployed against all of these multiple goals that we have.
Thank you, Mark. I think that we add to that the whole transportation complexities.
Yes.
In West Concord, we add to that the vitality of our existing businesses and oncoming businesses. I mean, it's extraordinarily complex, and MCI is one thing, but then of course there's Junction Village, which is another thing. It's a vast matrix, and I hope that we're clever as a town, or thoughtful as a town, and not kind of siloing it to one place or another place or another place, but that we put the entirety of the event. Yeah.
I would add, Diane, just briefly, is the initiative that Megan just described, this land use matrix, is really about taking the municipal purposes and putting the lens of town operations and efficiencies and what kinds of investments need to be made in town facilities, and saying, okay, if we were thinking about it from that perspective, what would the priorities from that perspective look like? Now, somebody who focused on affordable housing might come up with a different set of priorities, or recreation might come up with a different set of priorities, but we recognize that the town needs to be able to articulate that, and that's what that particular piece that Megan just described to us is supposed to accomplish and feed into this overall planning that needs to be done townwide.
Well, I respect that so, Mark, but Mark, as patina after patina after patina gets laid on this, it seems to me, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, as you well know, it seems to me more than just the select board's deliberation. It requires much broader, but I know you know that, so I will be quiet, but thank you very much.
Thanks. Hopefully that was helpful for others as well.
Carlin?
Hi, thanks. Carlin Reed, 83 West End. I'm a member of the Finance Committee, but speaking on my own behalf, I would strongly recommend that the Select Board consider the date where the risk of loss passes to the town. I have a sense that there may be a gap, and the town needs to be adequately covered from a liability insurance and fencing standpoint when the school committee votes to abandon Peabody versus when the town meeting actually allows the town to take possession of it. I'm guessing there might be a couple months gap in there, and I'm not sure the town has made adequate preparations for the date when the risk of loss passes to the town. Thanks.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to mention very briefly what I mentioned at the League of Women Voters in terms of helping to think about this a little bit. And I'm sorry to repeat the metaphor of planes in a holding pattern over an airport, and we have to figure out how to land them. But there are two aspects of timing which are important. So any group is going to have to deal with the timing. One is when's the land available? MCI will be available probably sooner than 2229, which won't be available until the end of the decade. PBA will be available sooner, so that's one aspect. And then there's the timing of needs. When do we have to fill critical needs? Which airplanes are running out of fuels? So there's, some needs can wait, others can't wait. So I think those two factors are going to weigh pretty heavily on any deliberations. And Diane, to your point, there will be a lot of people that will provide input to what those needs are. And of course, then you have the budget issues and capital planning behind all of this. So yeah, I don't know if I've overcomplicated or simplified it, but those are some of my thoughts on planning.
Thank you, Megan. Very informative. Lots of exciting conversations and discussions and deliberations ahead, you can see. And I think we'll turn over to the Housing Authority, and Stefan's here to do that presentation or discussion.
Thank you, Liz, and apologies for not being here at the beginning. I want to make sure we don't violate any open meeting law. I saw Ed on the Zoom. Are there any other Housing Authority members here? Did I bring us
No,
to a
I think it
quorum?
was just the two of you.
Good, that keeps it simple.
I apologize, Stephanie is here. Stephanie Kroback.
Oh,
Oh,
Stephanie.
okay.
Great, so we should call.
Is that a quorum then for you?
Yes. So then we have a quorum. I'm here, Stefan Bader, present, and on Zoom we have Stephanie Kroback.
Yep, here.
And Ed Larner. We had Ed Larner.
No, he's there. I see him.
Okay.
Yeah, you're all set.
So we've.
I'm here.
Good.
Very good. Thank you.
We clear that hurdle. Thank you. Thank you, everyone else, for joining in the presentation tonight. Up to this point, we've heard mostly about development and new projects and things on the horizon and things going into the ground next week and so on. The Concord Housing Authority has been around since the 1960s, and so at this point, we have a little over 130 units that we own and manage, and our thing, if you will, is to maintain and preserve and improve those units and keep them affordable and livable, because it's all well and good to go build new stuff, but eventually if you don't keep it up, you're not really making real progress. So with that introduction and background as to our piece of the puzzle here, we operate through two branches, if you will, the Concord Housing Authority LLC, which is a separate legal entity, and that holds most of the properties that are not state funded and state created. And in that front, we have a couple of things going on. One is that because the LLC properties cannot look to the state for funding for significant capital needs, it's up to us to plan, just as any other landlord would, or any homeowner for that matter, to say, let's make sure that we have enough money available to replace the roof 5 years from now, to replace the boilers 15 years from now. And so to be responsible, we've recently engaged independent experts to provide a physical needs assessment of the 19 units that are in the LLC, with a goal to getting a benchmark starting point as to what is the condition of all of the components of the properties. And then the next step is to say what is going to need to be replaced when. And finally, okay, looking over a 20-year horizon, how much money do we need to set aside each month so that as these various projects and these various properties come up, we'll be ready to fund them? Because we can't go to the state, we can't go to HUD, we might or might not be able to go to the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, but our objective is to not have to do that. So to the extent that we can set aside the money ourselves from our own revenue stream and be responsible, that's what we're doing on that maintenance front. we got the report back at the last board meeting in January, a couple of weeks ago. We looked at it. The discussion will come back again as to the financial end of that. So that's in progress, not quite done. The other thing that the LLC entity is looking forward to is towards the handoff from the Concord Housing Development Corporation of the two-family building that faces Old Marlborough Road. This is part of the Assabet Bluff project area. The existing two-family house is going to be deeded over to the Housing Authority, and we will maintain the rental, be responsible for the maintenance and the rental of that two-family property, whereas the Habitat-built housing units in the back will be sold to resident owners, and they'll be responsible for their maintenance. But it's the same parcel in a condominium form, but we will, once all the legal dust settles, and we'll be taking over the ownership as well as the maintenance, which we're helping the CHDC with maintenance currently. So that's an example of how we're talking to each other here at the table and we're working together. I'm going to switch now to the Concord Housing Authority, the original, like before New Coke, the old Coke. The original units that we have going back to the 60s. We have various systems and issues with some of those properties that are in the process of being addressed. And the first one is the septic system at Strawberry Hill Road. Though the septic system serving those multifamily rental family housing units is in the process of failing, but we have secured funding from the state, capital funding, to replace the septic system and to pay for the whole project, pretty much. A project of that size and scope takes some time to design and put out to bid and everything else, so the state also included funding for us to have the septic tanks pumped until they actually get to the reconstruction phase. But that is ongoing. The funding has been improved, and so we're working forward on that front. We also recently, since the last time we met as the Housing Roundtable, we received funding from the state for over $1.1 million to install air source heat pumps at our Everett Gardens and Everett Gardens expansion senior housing development right here in downtown Concord. And that's important for several reasons. Obviously, to state the obvious, the air source heat pumps will provide air conditioning that wasn't previously available in some of these older brick buildings. And it's cold today, but in the summertime, it can get hot, and hot summers are getting hotter, and hot summers and seniors don't go well together. So the ability to offer them air conditioning is going to be great, as will the efficiency of the new units in terms of heating. So that's another one in the win column with the state. And then the last two more items on Concord Housing Authority properties in general. We are going to be working to develop a list of needs that we might come to Liz and company to look for home funding to help us pay for. That is, again, looking forward, and as is looking forward to seeing what can be done about our Bedford Street property, which has a septic system which is still working but takes up a lot of land. And the Bedford Street property is not really that far away from the sewage treatment plant. And if we could possibly put a pipe between the existing apartments and the sewage treatment plant, we would have space freed up from no longer needed septic system, where we might be able to build a few more family units, and we need family units here in Concord. So that's the long and the short of what Concord Housing Authority has been up to since the last time we met.
Thank you. I think the home funds would be great. sorry, it'd be great to do a project with the Housing Authority with the home funds, so, very good. Any comments, questions for the Housing Authority and Stefan? Okay, great. I want to note that the time, I see that we're almost an hour and a half in, so we have a few more presentations and updates, so just to let everyone know. So from the Planning Board, I don't know who's presenting. Andrew, you presenting? Very good, thank you. There's just a lot going on, right? A lot of good updates.
Andrew Boardman, the Planning Board Chair. We developed MBTA rules, and this is basically what we've done this year relative to all that you all have discussed, as opposed to affirmative project-related items. Rules and regs for the MBTA communities was adopted on December 17th, where our district compliance application was submitted December 26th.
Can you get a little closer to the mic?
Sure. Is that better?
No.
Giraffe naked? Like this? I mean, is this okay?
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I will be 4 to 6 inches away. We are waiting on additional state feedback on the formal components. It may involve a revision to maps or other MBTA-related items, but the board determined it was appropriate for us to hold off going back to town meeting for anything until we got a formal response from the state, so that way it would only be one bite at the apple again. Other than that, the planning board has 8 articles before town meeting this year. PRD revisions, which was put forth by the Concord Housing Foundation, asking the board to put forth the article, changes the bonus structure of PRD, removing references to 80% AMI units while leaving references to 110 and 150. This was to basically, the existing rules weren't actually producing any housing, so the thought being that if we incentivize a slightly different makeup of those units, there's the possibility that workforce housing will be created by private developers without town money, which is always a positive. On the zoning side, there's revisions to the floodplain conservancy district, a clerical correction to the sign bylaw, a housekeeping amendment, joint parking requirement, and 2 articles which were brought forth at the behest of the Economic Vitality Committee related to accessory retail sales in industrial zone districts and a change in the parking structure for business use in commercial districts. Basically changing from one existing use to another does not require going before the planning board, retail to retail, that kind of thing. And then additional revisions to the ADU bylaw, where there was a recent change in state law requiring towns not, put unreasonable restrictions on ADUs, and the state provided certain guidelines. The planning board developed rules which were designed to be compliant with that. Additionally, the town, or the planning board chose to revise the bylaws a little bit to provide for additional by right area within those units, so from 750 to 1,000 square feet, and deletion of other certain provisions which may not be permissible, like occupancy by the owner, or those kind of things, parking related to within the MBTA zone, a half mile of train stations. So all in all, designed to bring our ADU bylaw into compliance with state law. And that's what I have. Don't know if there's any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Any questions?
I have a quick question. First of all, thank you, Andrew, especially on behalf of the Economic Vitality Committee. I'm the liaison for the 2 warrant articles that you're advancing for them, so thank you for that. Is the planning board also considering doing anything around easing parking requirements in residential areas this year? Are you thinking of putting forward any articles addressing that?
We had discussions surrounding that issue at meetings this year. What we ran into was, absent more recent information about parking usage, availability in town, and what those requirements are, it didn't seem like we should shoot from the hip and just make it up. Especially given that those types of changes that are not supported but seem good intentioned tend to be the ones that come back to bite you at town meeting. So we thought it was better to focus on the items that were clear cut, that we could make an affirmative or positive change to, and wait for additional guidance as it becomes available.
So when you say come back to bite you, I like that image. Do you mean that you would like to be like more prepared?
Yes, it's a combination of being more prepared as well as where we're making statements about parking usage and availability and all of those things.
Yep.
The moment you say, hey, other communities are doing this, someone will stand up there and say, well, Concord is special. And it will immediately create a negative feedback loop, at least in my experience. And it's not to say Concord isn't different than other communities, but it's hard to paint with a broad brush what is good, what you see as positive change in Cambridge and Minneapolis, other states that have gotten away with completely revising their thing, is to say, Concord's a suburban community. We don't know without supporting data that the existing rules about the number of parking units per bedroom isn't appropriate anymore. And the six unelected people who are on our committee aren't necessarily the right people to be making that without any more support.
Okay. It was one of the select board goals that we put together when we put together our goals to look at parking, specifically residential parking. And I understand that it's much more complex than we realized, I think. But I would really encourage you to continue that. I think you're going to rightly miss this year's warrant closing, but to go forward, because I hear a lot about, just a lot about parking, of how it constrains development, constrains housing, and yet sometimes when we have housing, we have just a huge amount of impervious surface. So it's complicated, right? So
yes.
I would really encourage you to.
Yes, especially where you look at where a lot of those rules were made up at some point in the 20s and 30s.
Right. So that's
of someone else shooting from the hip. Yeah.
So thank you for what you're doing this year. I just would like to see that work continue.
Thank you. I don't know if I had any other online comments before I step down. No?
Thank you. Matt, are you going to be do you want to do an update or presentation? Were you planning to do that here? No, you weren't. Okay. Just checking. Okay, do you want to take that? Maybe we'll take that out of order just because it follows right on the planning board topic. Rich, hi. Where are you? There you are. Hi.
I'm here. So the foundation's objective is to catalyze policies and developments that make housing available across the spectrum in Concord. And as people may remember, we were sort of the first ones to talk up the transfer fee, and we're still active in the transfer fee coalition. Matt's ideas on PRDs, I think, which came forward from him with the foundation support, are an attempt to get more and smaller units that the workforce can afford. And we're engaged in a debate around what, if any, buy-down should be. This is a place where we respectfully disagree a bit with CHDC because it's easier to buy a condo and resell it at a lower cost to a qualifying owner, but it doesn't increase or save the number of relatively low-cost units in Concord when smaller houses are bought up and torn down all the time. So we intend to participate there. But the thing we've done most recently is some of our board members have said, you know, there are people out there who can afford the monthly rent, but they can't afford the 3 months or more and moving expenses that it takes to get into an apartment in Concord. So we've just made a small grant to the Council on Aging to see if there are elders, particularly elders without significant assets, perhaps being priced out of their current apartment, that would assist. And we would love to work with the town to see if this would help some town employees who want to live here, particularly those who are earlier in their careers, to move to Concord. That yes, my salary is adequate to pay the monthly rent, but you know, I've only been out of school for 2 years and I haven't saved the $8,000 or $10,000 that it'll cost me to move in. So that's our current small project, and those are the things that we're pushing on in the long run. Thanks. Now, take any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Rich. Any questions? That sounds like a good, innovative program. Curious to see how that goes. Great.
Well, while Megan's here, I'll just make the request. If somebody in the HR department would contact me, we'd be very pleased to work with you to see, you know, as you hire new people over the next year, if this might make a difference for some of them being able to live here. So anyhow, that offer's out there.
Great. Mary, do you have any updates from the select board?
Actually, a lot of what we've talked about already tonight touches on what we've done, but I'm going to just repeat just a few things that I think are important. First of all, the select board had been working on reissuing or rebringing the articles for the home rule petitions, but we no longer need to do that because our legislative delegates will file that for us. So that's one less thing that we have to do. The select board has been supportive of the town manager's decision to allocate $500,000 of ARPA money for the 91B, and I know that the town manager is expecting to have our new community development manager who starts at the end of January. That will be one of the things that she'll be focusing on how to negotiate with the state. So I think we've got somebody working on that. The 2229 Main Street, the next step with that will be a forum that we will have on February 3rd. So we will have a forum at the select board meeting. The 2229 Main Street Task Force will be there. We'll listen to any comments, questions from people. The select board will discuss, and then the following meeting will decide next steps for the 2229 Main property. And we've already talked about the land use matrix and how we're putting together a working group. And we're in the process of writing up the charge now. I think we'll probably get that up and running in a month or two. So that's all I got.
Pretty good, pretty good. And the CPC.
Ed Larner, I'm a member of the CHA Housing Authority, and I've been appointed as a housing representative on the CPC. I also have been attending these roundtables ever since 2017, when we had some housing issues that really were heating up, and the housing crisis was going on. And I really, once I got on the CPC, I kind of emphasized that CPC should be part of the roundtable, and I'm so glad to see Diane here and Sue Felshen, of course, Mary Hartman and Paul Bohm, all members of the CPC. So we're really attending tonight, and I appreciate that. What's going on right now is, well, actually in 20 minutes, we're going to have our meeting to finalize the warrant item that will go on town meeting. So I'll be quick, so it won't take a lot of time. But we only had 7 projects, submitted on time this year, which means we were overfunded. We usually have about $1.8 million of CPC funding, and so there's a lot of discussion about how it would be used. Luckily, or from my point of view, housing got about 50% of the funding, most of it going to the Affordable Housing Trust. And we also put our, Concord share of the Regional Housing Services Office, so those are the two housing items. We also had a problem in the sense that the preservation projects didn't come up to the required 10%. There's has to be 10% for housing, 10% for preservation, 10% open space and recreation. And so we really are going to be discussing tonight actually having the need to have reserves, so that we actually will reserve some money for preservation, I believe, and so that we come up with that. And so we're looking forward to having a strong warrant item that people will support at town meeting. I see that Paul has a question. You're muted, Paul.
I'm sorry, it's a question for Mary. It's not a CPC question, but if you're finished, then I'll ask the question.
Just thanks, for everybody being here tonight, and I think it'll be really good for the roundtable to know where the money's coming from.
Thanks. A question for Mary. You mentioned that the hearing, the discussion on 2229 was on February 3rd.
No, 10th.
I think
10th.
The calendar has it February 10th.
No, did I say the 3rd? That was my mistake. My mistake.
Okay, you did. Yeah, it's the 10th.
You're right, Paul. It's the 10th.
Okay,
It's the 10th.
thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Ed. Are there any questions for Ed? Okay, so I think that we're through the agenda, and I think we'll turn it over, if there's no other questions for anyone, before each group adjourns. We'll convene again in 3 months. In March, we'll find a good time relative to town meeting and the meetings leading up to town meeting. And so we'll start with the Housing Authority. I think you will adjourn by board.
Housing Authority, roll call vote to adjourn. Ed Larner.
Here.
And Stephanie Krobeck.
Here.
Thank you, and myself, Stephan Bader. We, Housing Authority, adjourned.
6:41 is that's our adjourn time. Okay, so Julie?
Roll call vote to adjourn the CHDC. Ray?
Herb.
Great. Lee? Yes. And Julie? Yes. Thank you.
Keith?
Roll call vote to adjourn the trust. Mary?
Here, I mean, gone.
Keith gone. Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Aye.
All right, and I think that's all that are still here, so thank you.
CPC, does CPC need to adjourn? I don't know that we adjourn, but we need, there are 4 of us here, so.
4, not 5? I had you as 5, but okay.
Okay, or 5, there's probably someone here I didn't, yeah.
Okay. Mary?
I move that we adjourn. Paul?
Yeah, thank you.
I see a thumb.
Aye, yes, aye.
And Sue, I hear a yes, adjourn.
Aye, although we don't need a motion.
Oh, we don't need a motion. Okay, never mind. Bye, guys.
See you in a few minutes.
Hey, thank you for a very informative meeting. Really helpful.
Totally confusing. Mary, in the select board?
I guess we should adjourn. Mark Howell,
Sure.
Wendy, and me.
Okay, very good. Okay, thanks, everybody.